Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. This is already the 7th webinar of our MOps Unlocked series, where we focus on marketing operational challenges you will no doubt all recognize. My name is Len and I'm Consultancy Director at CRMT Digital. And with me today is Annabelle Loveluck, Data Analyst at CRMT and very experienced at dealing with all marketing data challenges. And as we all know, for marketing, data is our #1 asset. If this is your first webinar of our MOps Unlocked series, I'd like to give you a quick introduction to CRMT Digital. We are a marketing operations consultancy that helps B2B companies unlock value from their marketing technology investments. We support most best-of-breed B2B marketing platforms like Marketo, Eloqua, HubSpot, and Pardot, but we also understand the wider technology landscape, including CRM systems, BI tools, and many, many more. We love all things tech, but not just for technology's sake. It starts with a strategy, and that includes a data strategy. And data is exactly what we will talk about today. Annabelle, what will we cover in this session?
So we'll be talking all things data, which is very fun. So let's have a look at the agenda. So we'll be looking at what bad data is and what good data is, and how we can identify that, how we can use that to leverage creating a healthy database, why take action and what actions to take. And we'll also be looking at Normalator, which is the tool that automates data categorization and normalization and can optimize and automate data health. So let's take a look at bad versus good data. So what is bad data? That's kind of the golden question. What's bad data and how can we identify it and get rid of it or optimize it into good data? So bad data is either inaccurate, inconsistent, or irrelevant. So inaccurate meaning that it's incorrect, it's out of date. I think it could be a contact that's moved jobs and their old email address is obviously not current anymore, so that data isn't useful, it's not accurate. Inconsistent data, so missing data points or unstandardized data that might be in the wrong field or it hasn't been kind of categorized correctly, say having a city and a country field, etc. And irrelevant data as well, so data that's not usable or it's not required for business needs, or duplicate values. So anything that's kind of not necessary for business requirements, and it doesn't serve us. There's no reason to keep that data, at least in its current form. So let's take a look at an example of what bad data looks like in real life. So here's an example kind of data set on what bad data could look like. So we've got a contact database here of lots of different characters and their job titles. So we can see first name and last name fields are really messy. There's no standardization there in terms of what characters to use, i.e. special characters probably shouldn't be included in name fields, unless perhaps a hyphen is necessary. So that's data that we can definitely tidy up to create it into good data. That's more usable. There's also kind of fields looking at job title. We've got lots of good job titles there, but then some junk data. So say QWERTY 1234 is clearly not a job title, so that's unusable data. There's no purpose for that in the database. And we could also see some missing city and country fields where perhaps we could fill those in. So let's take a look at what kind of category they sit in. So we can see, specifically city, country, there's a lot of data there that is usable, that we can kind of derive one field to create another and help to populate our database into a healthy one that's got as much data as kind of can be optimized. So looking at bad data, while I was researching for this deck, I actually found some of the impacts of bad data, which I found quite interesting. So back in 1998, NASA launched a space probe called the Mars Climate Orbiter, and due to bad data, it actually never performed a single test, and it was all down to using the metric system. And yeah, if they had converted it, it obviously would be good data. But in this case, it was a $193 million mistake. So yeah, that's just an example of what bad data can do. So if you ever think you're having a bad day at work, you're not. So let's have a look at good data. So good data is essentially the opposite of bad data, right? So it's accurate data, it doesn't contain errors, it's up to date, it's actual usable data. It's comprehensive, so it's got all of the information we need for our reporting, our segmentation, lead gen. So it's everything we need in kind of fields that potentially we might have something like a zip code, but no state or country. We can actually derive those fields from a field that we do have and kind of complete the data set. It's standardized, so we're looking at having defined pick lists for easy usability, and that also really helps with reporting, which is something I personally enjoy. So yeah, I mean, having a defined pick list or even kind of after the fact standardizing fields into defined pick list values is super important, and making sure also to have the data integrated into systems where it can be or where it's necessary. So hopefully that kind of covers what good data and bad data is. So we can look at, in these examples, first name and last name. We can really normalize those into clean values, and we can take a messy value where it's capitals all over the place, smiley faces, random special characters, and we can remove those, so we've got a clean data set ready to be used. We can also look at, say, job titles. So an example here is where we've got a job title where someone's gone to a form and on a free text field just entered QWERTY 1234, and we know that that's obviously not a real job title, so we can remove that. Obviously, it's dependent on each business whether you'd want to remove these kind of fields where you think it's junk, and sometimes it's necessary to remove them, but you may want to keep them and then kind of create a tidy version of that field. So yeah, that's something I would recommend. And we can also look at job titles, and we can create new fields from that, looking at job functions or job levels, where we can actually use that for segmentation or reporting, and derive that job title field into two new fields that will really help. And there's no kind of reason not to do that if the right systems and kind of cleaning up is put into place. As mentioned before, we can also look at geographical fields. So we've got, in this example, we've got some fields with a zip code and no state, city, country. We've got cities that aren't kind of formatted correctly, they're not standardized. And then we can also see some of these could potentially have state values populated, and country also, instead of having US of A, United States of America, we can categorize those into a tidy normalized United States value, as shown on the right hand side. And then we can also populate the country code and regions for a nice, clean, populated database. So with all that said and done, why does it actually matter? So obviously there's multiple reasons why that matters. So we can look at expanding market research, identifying the accounts, verticals and segments that are interested in your solutions, creating high quality leads and having them ready for sales, which is super important, running campaigns and improving reporting as well. So yeah, you always want to have kind of a clean place to start with reporting, rather than reporting on messy data. It would end up in having potentially incorrect results, which can drive the wrong decisions to be made, which is obviously super important. So yeah, data health. Sorry, go on.
No, and personalization has a massive positive benefit impact on the amount of engagement that you get. So even if you make sure that some of that data is a little bit more accurate, which allows you to do just a little bit more personalization that already will impact your marketing results quite drastically. So it's definitely worth doing.
100%. So how do we do it? How do we achieve a healthy database and clear out the junk data or inconsistent data, tidy it up, ready for all those reporting, segmentation, etc. So the key focus areas are firstly identifying the bad data. So how do we actually find it? How do we know what's junk and what's not? How do we know what's standardized, what's not standardized? Kind of how do we look at the current state of play in our own systems? Once we do that, we should then take action. So we found a solution. Now we need to action it, implement those processes and automations to increase data quality. And then once we've done that, we can look back and react to how well that's worked, if there's any kind of data that's still not being optimized, and kind of do a rinse and repeat process throughout that cycle. So let's have a look at identifying bad data. So let's have a look. So what we can do, or what we recommend, is creating a data health dashboard where you can analyze your whole database and say, okay, how many records do I have, objects, field, kind of look at the whole picture. What do I actually have in play? Looking at each of those kind of objects or data sets. Do we have any duplicates? We can do a count on, ID or email address to see if we've got duplicates, and then remove any, unnecessary data. Looking at data completeness, so how populated are fields, particularly the ones that we're actually using. Looking at marketable contacts, recency of contact, recency of engagement, looking at the consent status, and also looking at trends. So are we actually improving, say, completeness over time? Can we see that the count of populated fields is going up once we're doing our actions and reactions, and making sure that's on a good trajectory? And this is just an example of what that looks like. So we can see here, we can look at each region's total contacts versus mailable contacts. If they're not mailable, how recently we've contacted them, and how recently they've engaged. So yeah, it's really important to keep up with this and reassessing it over time to make sure that it's going up with the actions that you're taking, to make sure that those actions are actually working, and if they're not, taking a look at why aren't these actions working, and how can we improve them. Next up, we'll look at actions, so taking decisive actions to clean and optimize the database. So this is actually kind of once you've done your analysis, putting it into play. What are the pain points that we need to look at and increase the data health on specific fields, or there might be a specific problem that you're seeing with duplications, etc. So firstly, data standardization, so using drop-down values in fields. So yeah, using those pick list values really does help to keep everything standardized, and it makes it a lot easier for reporting, specifically because, yeah, I mean, it's impossible to do a report with, several different values that are actually the same thing. So you really want to standardize and keep that tidy. Looking at data validation, so in the systems themselves, creating rules to manage records, setting required fields on forms. I'll just go through these quickly. We've got a lot to cover. Automating and integrating processes. So if a record is not engaged over time, then potentially they might be unmailable. Have a look at these. Data normalization, which we'll be going into in a lot more detail with Normalator. As I said, deduplication, and also lead to account matching. So data normalization, I can't speak today. Data normalization in front of mind. Let's have a look at Normalator and what that can do. So
sorry to interrupt, but there's so much in your data set that you can infer from the data that you have. I mean, if you have no country populated, but you do have a state, you know, if you know that it's Texas, then you can imply that actually the country will be United States. And from that, you can then derive other things, you know, what region it would be in, for example. So even though you might have a few data points, there's so much that you can do with that will all support your segmentation and personalization.
Yeah, 100%. And we're actually going to have a look at that in a bit more detail as well. So I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that can be inferred for sure, as you mentioned, and it's a really easy way to improve that data completeness when there's probably a lot of data that might just be kind of not inferred into, like you say, state, country, region, etc. So yeah, it's a great thing to do. So let's have a look at how we can do that in Normalator. So for anyone that's not familiar with Normalator, it's a platform that we have here at CRMT. It's a kind of data categorization and normalization platform. It's self-service and can also be managed by us. And it kind of, categorizes and normalizes data connected to marketing automation systems. So yeah, it's a good way to automate cleaning your data. So some of the services that Normalator offers, so we can take job titles and infer job function and job level. So that's looking at, say, a job function. It's looking for anything with, say, engineer in the name. If it's senior engineer, junior software engineer, web engineer, anything like that, and you're searching for that term to categorize it into, say, a technical role, or, you know, the different functions and job levels, which are all customized to each kind of business's requirements. And then it can be mapped to personas. So there's kind of different levels of inferring data. So you could take job title to job function, job title to job level, and then using those job levels and job functions and then inferring personas, for example. So yeah, it's a pretty good tool. It can also do things like creating a revenue band if you've got a revenue kind of amount in your data set for a company, employee size, standardizing industries, phone numbers, also a great one. So it's kind of reformatting phone numbers to, say, an international format. So you can then pass that on to your sales team, and it's in a standardized set that they don't need to kind of chop and play around with it. Everything's kind of in that format ready to send over. And then also region, country, zip to state mapping. So let's have a look at that in action.
And you know, just to jump in here, if you're even if you're not a massive company, you're already experiencing that data comes from so many different places. I mean, you probably have marketing automation systems, so forms feed into your marketing automation system, but you also have your CRM system that might have slightly different values, or salespeople that fill in slightly different data. You might have third-party data vendors, content syndication. So all of those platforms, all of those sources will feed into your system. So it's hard to maintain, and if you do that manually, then that's going to get very, very painful.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when all those systems have different, say, pick list values, you can actually kind of create a messy data set. Even though it's clean data from multiple sources, it all of a sudden becomes messy when they're not matching in one place.
Exactly.
Right, so let's take a look at Normalator. Bear with me one moment. Oh, so this is Normalator. So this is what you see kind of when you log in, and I'll go into how exactly it works and how it's customized as we go through. So you'll see on the side here, actually, let me zoom in a little bit. So on the side here, we've got services and projects, which are kind of like the core elements of Nominator. So a service is taking a set of rules and categorizing data from one field into another. So say we can look at the example of job titles to job functions. So inside this service, we've got rules, and we can see there's pages and pages and pages of these rules, which have all been kind of curated to match a specific pick list of job functions. So we can see we're actually using regex here, which if you're not familiar, is regular expression, which kind of is a kind of code that matches a certain kind of value with a lot of, how's the best way to describe it? A lot of flexibility. So for example, here we've got multiple rules that are looking for job titles that include engineering. So it might look a bit kind of confusing to look at, but actually what it's doing here is it's searching in the whole job title field in a database, is looking for engine and then anything A to Z, so any characters A to Z after engine. So that would capture engineering, engineer, and then that also captures, engineer with typos or different languages where it, the term starts with engine. So it's capturing multiple variations of that job title using one rule. So it's a pretty nifty way to do it, if I do say so myself. And yeah, so it's got multiple rules that match different titles. So we've got general management, which would be looking at kind of board of directors. And again, you can see that here. So director could be, director in multiple languages, where it's kind of spelt differently, but the term DIR is all kind of kept the same throughout. So yeah, it's got a high match rate using that method, which is great. We can also look at an analysis. So I've included some training data here, which is essentially taking a list of job titles and assigning those rules to those titles to infer the function. So we can see how that's working here, and we can also look at an analysis of how well that's working. So we can see of all of our data set from our training data, what percentage is assigned to whichever different category. And it's especially useful if we look at unknowns. So that's titles that haven't been categorized to a job function. So we can go in and look at unknown, and then we can figure out, okay, why is that unknown? Are we missing a rule, or what's going on there? So then we can see, okay, the term receptionist isn't returning a job function. So that could either be that for our business need, we don't want to include receptionist, we want to keep that blank, that shouldn't be categorized. Or we can say, actually, no, we do want to categorize that, and we can put it into let's put it into services and support and update that. And then that should, that means that our receptionist title has now been categorized. It's no longer in that unknown pool. So that's kind of a quick summary of how that works. And we've got different services for multiple different categorization. So you can see there's job title to function, seniority, country name to ISO code, city, country normalization, industries, revenue banding, employee banding. There really isn't much of a limit with what you could create, as long as it's kind of got a general rule that rules can be created from, and there's a trend of what terms to look for, then anything can really be categorized.
And just to state the obvious here, once you run your analysis and looked at those patterns, which words are common but don't return a rule, you can create the rule directly from the platform. But that also means that every time a new record comes in that matches that rule, it gets normalized. So you're not doing it just a one-off. It's continuous going forward.
Yeah, exactly. So the rule is added to the kind of rule set, which will go through the whole database. So yeah, it's not just kind of a one-to-one. It's going to match anything that matches. So then having a look at how that actually works in practice. So once we create a service, those services can be added to a project, and a project is what would be added or connected to your marketing automation platform, so Marketo, Eloqua, etc. And that would take the data, clean it, and then throw it back in. So let's have a look at services. So I've created this to have a look at kind of the different ways that we can tidy up data through the examples that I showed in the deck earlier on, where we had the messy names and country fields, etc. So we've got a list of services here, and as you'll see, there's some where we see service, we've got some functions, which are essentially like Excel formulas, but in Normalator, it's kind of the most similar comparison. And then we've also got services, so looking at that job title to seniority, job title to function, etc. So all of these could be run on the same data set at the same time, consecutively. So let's have a look at the data. So we can see here, oops, let it refresh, that we've got our names, we've got the original data, which is, yeah, messy, not great. Titles, we've got our junk data in there, and we've got our geographical fields, which could be better populated. So through Normalator, we've put some services and functions together, which actually turn those into nice, clean data. We're able to remove that junk data where it's QWERTY 123 by using rules, and we can also infer the job level, job function, and also tidy up where we've got, say, a zip code. Through Normalator, we've managed to say, okay, that zip code is in this state, which belongs to this country, which is assigned to this country code and assigned to this region, etc.
If I start using this platform, do I have to build up each of those services with rules myself?
No, so the services, if I go back here, I can show you. So there are, I think it's about 15 different services which are kind of templates out of the box, which once you sign into Normalator, you can use, and they're literally ready to plug in and go. So they include everything with the kind of shared icon here, actually. So the job title ones, geographical, we've also got the bandings, revenue banding, employee banding, country code to language, industry. So there's a lot to work from kind of straight away. But to note as well, they can also be customized. So say if your seniority levels didn't fit, just run this analysis. So here are categories for job seniority or job level: a C-level, director, executive, individual contributor, manager, and student. So say, you know, in someone's business needs, they might say, actually, we want a different level that's not been listed here. That could be customized in the rule set. So while it is out of the box, it can also be custom. There's a lot of kind of flexibility with how it works.
And when you do have something, a use case that's not covered in any of the standard rule sets, then you can always build something from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the kind of template of how a rule set works is kind of built in as well. So it's not a case of only being able to choose these. You can also create a brand new one from scratch, which, yeah, is pretty simple. So yes, does that cover everything?
Yeah, this is great. What would
Okay.
you say the benefit is of using Normulator over building something in a marketing automation platform? Because especially something like Eloqua or Marketo does have the ability of doing some normalization.
Yeah, I mean it does. I do think it's somewhat limited in a marketing automation platform. Obviously, it's not kind of the sole use case, whereas in Normulator, that's the whole use case, and there's a lot of flexibility, and it's a lot more comprehensive in terms of creating rules and kind of deciding exactly how you want to standardize or categorize certain data points. So yeah, there's a lot more flexibility. I would say
Mhm.
that's a key benefit.
So if I hear this correctly, the main benefit of Normulator is that it continuously normalizes the data as it comes in,
Yeah,
or in batches if you need to. It deals with a much greater complexity than a marketing automation platform will be able to deal with, and you're able to set up rules and maintain your rule set in a much easier way. And of course, it has all those templates built in that can help you get a swift start when you start normalizing and cleaning up your data.
yeah,
Is that right?
exactly. That is right. Tick, tick, tick.
Excellent. That's that's great. Um, Thank you so much. This is really useful. Thanks so much for taking us through this today. Um, is there anything else you want to cover?
I was just going to quickly cover, it might be getting a bit too technical, but I just thought I'd quickly include it. Um, when we speak about the kind of benefits of using something like Normulator rather than a marketing automation platform, I think a good kind of use case is the regex capabilities that Normulator has. So for example, I mean, this looks a little bit confusing, but I promised it's not. Um, so Normulator, you can actually create a regex regular expression kind of formula through Normulator. So where we had the special characters in first name, for example, we can use regex to just quickly strip any special characters. So it's just going to keep any um, English or non-English alphabetical characters in one formula, which yeah, I mean, I don't think you can do that really in a marketing automation platform. So yeah, it is very flexible and comprehensive in terms of the capabilities. Um, so yeah, anyway, that's Normalator. Um,
So if you're into your regex, then this is perfect. You either
yeah,
love it or hate it, but it can do it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very powerful kind of tool to have.
Hmm.
So yeah, that is Normalator in a nutshell. Obviously, there's a lot more that we could go into, but I'll leave it there before it gets too technical and potentially confusing. Because yeah, I could spend a lot more time talking about it. So yeah, let's head back to the slide deck. There we go. So just to summarize how Normalator helps. So it's improving the data quality continuously, cleaning the data. It also has a machine learning element, which I won't go into today because, like I say, it would be too much information overload. And it connects directly with Eloqua and webhooks, Marketo, etc. For automated data optimization. And it's also a self-service portal, which is always good if you need help kind of on demand. But obviously we're also here to support. So once we've taken the actions, going back to the kind of cycle of identifying bad data, taking action to clean it and optimize. Then we go on to the reaction. So once that's all completed, we'll look at the data. Have our actions worked? What areas have they worked well? What areas have they not worked well? And then kind of rinse, repeat to continuously improve the data quality. So yeah, that's pretty much everything today. If you have any questions, let us know. Len, is there anything else you want to cover?
No, this is great. Thank you so much for taking us through this. Thanks everyone for joining us. This was already the 7th installment of MOPS Unlocked. We'll be sending you the recording so you can share them with your friends and colleagues. And look out for the invite on the next episode in our series. Thanks again for joining and have a great day.
Thanks.